Hello y'all! Making the Kingdom Hearts 3 review was so fun that it motivated me into spreading out my love and passion for the best game ever, the one, the only Final Fantasy X. And before I start, please check the description if you want to skip some parts because we are here for a long time. I don't get why this game is so controversial, is it though? All I know is that it shaped the person I am today, and I'm not even exaggerating. I was 8 when my sister bought the game on our PS2, and back then we had no memory cards, so my first plays of FF10 consisted in restarting the game again and again up to the Mi'ihen High Road where the bombs were my worst enemy. And I don't regret it happening that way because I was in love with Besaid, its colors, its music, the introduction of Lulu, the Killy Cat cutscene, losing the Blitzball tournament. Okay, for real, I love it. There are so many aspects of FF10 I want to develop, and I know I'm a bit late to do so, but I need to share my passion for this game with you, with my 20 viewers. Back then, the internet was only starting to being shaped into the chaos it is right now, and it allowed the huge fan I was to download tons of meaties and cutscenes. I believe the first FF you play is usually the one you like the most. That is at least true for people around me, and I believe it leads the players to want every other Final Fantasies to be like the one that introduced them to the FF universe. And that's the reason why I believe that I had no other choice but to fall in love with Final Fantasy X. On the other side of the spectrum, we have people who hate this game so much that even the way to pronounce the main protagonist's name was a source of drama. I love to say Tidus, and now I have to say Tidus. And well, I believe that is because, fight me, Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy IX was their first Final Fantasy. Anyway, I am one of the only people on Earth that doesn't have a lot of negative things to say about Final Fantasy X, and yes, you saw it coming. I'll defend the laughing scene everybody loves to hate for absolutely no reason with my life. Ever heard of character building?
Literally
Supposed
tell them
to
they're
be
weird.
awkward. But I'll come back to it later, trust me. I have thought day and night about how to discuss the game, the story, its complexity, and there is no solution that allows me to talk about everything in a logical way, so I will probably make a ton of videos covering different aspects, but right now I imagine that there will be 3 big parts. The first one will cover the external aspects, so the things that don't concern the story. The second part will be about the story itself, and I will probably still talk about external aspects because it's my video and not yours, so I do what I want. And then there's the last part about specific topics such as Yevon, the characters, the Crusaders, so an in-depth analysis of several important things. But let's see if I'll stick to it.
For life is full of surprises.
One last thing to end this introduction I'm pretty sure nobody listened to. If you're not scared of spoilers and truly want to be brainwashed by me into liking this game, be my guest and welcome. The video is however directed to people who know the game, as I want to always put things in context. So let's start right away with the external aspects. External as in not regarding the story. So these are the things regarding the game itself and not its beautiful, amazing, tremendous, great story, one of a kind. I'm out of superlatives because so first things first, the elephant in the room, the linearity of the game is probably the biggest criticism against Final Fantasy X, before Final Fantasy XIII came out, that is, I guess. As someone who's played the first hours again and again before discovering the whole game, I might have a biased opinion, since my childhood brain was probably conditioned to love the game in its linear form like a movie. So I'm not the most objective person when it comes to defending the linearity of the game. However, I have some solid arguments here I'd like to express. First off, the linearity seems to be a problem, especially if you've been introduced to Final Fantasy games before Final Fantasy X. I can totally understand how frustrating it can be to play this game that doesn't allow you to get lost on the map, search for cities or quests on your own like the previous titles allowed you to, making you feel like you're only walking from cutscene to cutscene. I get your point. Even more now that I've played Kingdom Hearts 3 and hated the game for this exact same reason. Some will say it's the nostalgia that gives my baby Final Fantasy X a free pass, or maybe it's because it's just not a complete joke like Kingdom Hearts 3, since the linearity has a purpose in Final Fantasy X, and since there are a lot of things that counterbalance the linearity to erase the character aspect. The linearity feels different than rushing you to finish the game, and that is the difference with Kingdom Hearts 3. In FF10, linearity is a way to tell the story of a pilgrimage. The characters keep on insisting on how they cannot waste any time or slow the pilgrimage down. On multiple occasions, it is reminded that the stops are either necessary, like in the temples, or unusual.
There's no temple here in Guadasalam, see? Summoners usually just pass through on their way elsewhere.
And the character literally says, "No time to waste, let's go," every occasion he gets. The game is about a race against sin, the other summoners, and death. It is made sure that the player understands he cannot deviate from the pilgrimage, and that justifies the linearity.
Please keep this short. Yuna must rush.
The pilgrimage isn't the only linear thing in the story. On a more symbolic side, the linear aspect clearly depicts the world of Spira and its people following the teachings of Yevon and perpetuating a spiral. Everything in this world is mechanical, and most of the people accept things without questioning them. They live through the teachings and die through sin. No change is allowed. But I'll come back to it in the second part. Moreover, the story focuses on Yuna and Tidus walking on the footprints of their fathers. This is underlined with the various spheres we find along our journey. This emphasizes the idea of a cycle that is about to be broken. The same goes for Wok and Lulu, who have already been guardians and walked these roads. There's a huge sense of life consisting in a loop. There's an objective, and only one, for all these people, Zanarkand, which is the starting point. Again.
Loops.
But that's not all. The extreme linearity is compensated with content within the corridors that conceal the said linearity. This is what differentiates FF10 from FF13. Just like for 10, the linearity is justified in 13 regarding the story it tells. However, 13 lacked surrounding content that make the player feel immersed, such as NPCs, CTs, dialogues, story. The linearity of FF10 isn't one that leads you nowhere. It's not only about unfolding the scenario, there's an objective, and while reaching it, you can still manage to dive deep into the stories of the characters and of Spiras. Some other games are just meant as a movie, and you have no idea where you're going. You're simply dragged there, whereas the linearity in Final Fantasy X is a part of the story and feels natural. There's no choice and no freedom of movement, until Oren says there is in Zanarkand. This is also what 13 tried to convey, but failed to do. But don't get me wrong, the game was meant to be a cinematic experience. First of all, a story like FF10's is so elaborate and dramatic that it could only be delivered through such a cinematic narrative, to my opinion. The world of Spira builds up alongside the characters, which gets you to discover everything in time. You learn everything you have to learn about Spira in a specific order and not by walking around like you would have in previous titles. In FF10, the cutscenes don't consist in telling you random and irrelevant stuff. Each scene adds something important to the story, and information about the character, a people, the story of Spira, etc. Just the comment about the voice acting, I've seen videos that kind of say it's poorly done, especially when it comes to Yuna. Maybe it's because English isn't my first language, but I think that they did a great job. It's funny because I've always felt that Yuna's voice perfectly fits her controlled and calm character. Another reason why the narrative was movie-like is probably linked to Squaresoft extending their technical limits. If they wanted to make the best of their great capacity of animation and the fact that characters are voiced, they couldn't simply follow the previous patterns. Even 15, that came out approximately 15 years after 10, still couldn't offer great animation and multiple locations at the same time, because it's simply too much work. Finally, what makes it up for the linearity in Final Fantasy X, it's that there's still much left to discover on your own. In Kingdom Hearts 3 or 13, the game solely focuses on the scenario and makes the player walk in breathtaking landscapes that are, however, barren. The only way to get to learn more about the universe of these games is to read secret reports or data logs in the pause menu, which really sucks. Sometimes they even have the audacity to assume you've watched the prequel movie or anime or played the mobile game before playing the main title, and don't bother explaining you shit in the game. In 10 it's different. Not only are all the key elements to understand the story given to you as the game plays, but you also have many opportunities to discover more about the background story, the culture, the world, or the people on your own as you talk to NPCs or unlock cutscenes in non-mandatory locations. The Remium Temple, the Cavern of the Stolen Faith, or Omega Ruins, for instance. When some concept needs deeper yet quick explanation, you can still count on Macon. In between corridors, the player comes across villages with NPCs and chests, which don't feel like corridors. Besaid, Kilika, Luca, Guadasalam. It may be not much, but it still gives you a sense of freedom. You're still in control of when the story will go on by talking to Waka, going to sleep, or talking to a random crusader before having thousands of guys to die. To be totally honest with you all, I don't remember FF12 that much, but if I'm not wrong, they did a great job between narrating a good story and leaving space for discovery. But I won't be able to compare because I truly don't remember much. One last thing, towards the end, even though it might seem like a poor consolation to people who really hate the linear aspect of FF10, there's a bunch of things to do once the game is over and not just 3 hunting missions. Secret content such as the hidden aeons, the minigames to unlock the celestial weapons or the dark aeons. To conclude about the linearity, as you walk through the magnificent landscapes of Spira with great music, you're experiencing every second of the game because every second of it matters. The story literally unfolds under your feet, giving you one element of explanation at a time. That's what changed everything. It's a mix between old school Final Fantasies where discovery is the key and the newer games in which you basically watch a movie because no exploration is possible. The linearity was vital to make the story of FF10 immersive, and it still manages to not rush you towards the end. I'm sorry, I just remembered FF13. I'm so happy this game showed people what an actual linear game is. So yeah, I wanted to say you can say FF10 is linear, but you can't say that it's monotone. You just can't. The second external aspect I wanted to talk about is the music. However, I won't insist a lot in here since I will mention them all during the second big part of my analysis. The music is simply great and we have to thank these dudes for it, and they're the ones that introduced me to the video games music world. You can tell how amazing of a job they've done by playing FF10 too and realizing how the same places lost all their charms with the new musics. There are some exceptions, but you get my point. I could make a video just about the FF10 music. I even might, it would consist in me forcing you to listen to the music, so yeah, I don't think it's a good idea. The music adds so much life and sadness and drama to the cinematic experience that you can't help but feel immersed. I mean...
So, tomorrow then.
Or...
The fiends may break through. This place is not safe. Make sure you're prepared to defend yourselves. Tell me when you're ready.
Can't you just feel how big of a turning point of the game is about to happen? Every single tune is just pure emotion, from To Xanarkin to the Mount Gagazet theme. We are blessed with marvelous titles. You know, just breathe, take in this art in you, open your ears and your soul, and most of all, thank these guys, dude. Thank these dudes, girl. There honestly aren't enough words to describe how much I love some of the tracks in this game. I will set a counter for the amazing music we'll encounter during the linear analysis of the second part, because I want to and I can. Another aspect I wanted to talk about is the Spiran world. I haven't to this day heard any bad review regarding the conception of Spira. It's a magnificent world we're offered, somehow poetic on its own, but the music helps for sure. It's colorful, living, diverse, and during the pilgrimage you truly travel and see different aspects of this world, and it makes you feel like you're on a journey. The fact that the game is one huge corridor makes sure you enjoy every bit of it. FF13, that had some beautiful landscapes, didn't take me in dreamy places like FF10 did, because the places lacked spirit. They were all mechanical, immense, and there were no details. As for FF15, that finally gave us an open world to wander in, I think there was no poetry in the places we visit. Only Altisha felt like eye candy. Only FF12 offered a world in which I felt like traveling, but this game has a total different charm to itself I cannot explain. As for FF7 and 8, I must admit they were rich in content, but it's not really comparable due to the technical limitations these games faced. I believe there is no Final Fantasy that delivered as much beauty as FF10 in terms of landscapes, but I'd love to hear what you guys have to say on that matter, because I know that I'm not the most objective person when it comes to FF10. Each place we visit in Spira has a different aura and energy, and they each match the mood of the party. Baj is creepy and abandoned, which marks the fact that Tidus is thrown into the unknown, which is scary. Besaid is warm and loving, Kilika is tragic and wounding, Luca is cheerful and crowded, Mycrox is harsh and brutal, Jose is sinister and mourning, Guadasalam is creepy, the lightning field is scary and marks the turbulence of Yuna, Makalania is the calm before the storm, and you guessed it, I'll mention everything in the second part. The corridors aren't oppressive like in FF13 because they all tell a story on their own, and it's a beautiful one. They make you enter the world and adapt to the characters' perspective and mood. And did I mention how beautiful they are? FF10 disconnects from the medieval European or cyberpunk idea of Final Fantasy. It took the road of a world without technology and focuses on nature and wilderness on which humanity cannot build too much. Funnily enough, it's way bigger than FF15 because it offers way more geographical diversity. The way Spira is built detaches from the linearity, not only because of all what I explained before, but also because there are a lot of pit stops and NPCs to talk to. You can learn about side plots and the supporting characters that way. As an example, there is this scene with Callie.
You're a summoner?
Or this scene with the little girl you save in Kirika, the Aurochs, Rin, Belgamine, Shalinda,
Donna, Lynn, Pat, Lori,
or any NPC you meet. They bring insight on the world and make it alive. It's not always about the current events the NPC are talking about, but rather the day-to-day subjects, which help to convey the idea that the world of Spira is alive. Even though FF15 made a huge progress on what FF can be, there still was no feeling of a world that was alive and evolving, except Altisha and Lestalem. But even there, things felt kind of frozen. FF10 was built in such a way that it shows you that there's life in a lot of places in Spira, even in the desert or on the mountains. It's important to note the paradox, or rather the emphasized contrast between a Spira covered by death or the threat of it, and an alive Spira despite the sword of Damocles hanging at all times. The game makes you go through all the life you have to protect and preserve, the things that are at stake, but also all the things you need to destroy to make Spira a better place. The very first playable path is a bridge in Zenerkand. In this corridor, there's still a lot of things you're shown. How big Zenerkand is, how big of a player Tidus is, the importance of Blitzball in his life, to sum up all the things Tidus will leave behind. Regarding the world of Spira, there's a lot of things to say about the geopolitics. I got totally aware of it thanks to the amazing work of Oren Liu, which I'll mention later in my analysis. You can find a link in the description toward his work. I strongly feel like only the technical barriers prevented FF10 from being a bigger masterpiece. Can we all agree that Altisha is obviously what Bouvel was supposed to be and Grand Pulse what the Calmlands were meant to be?
Oh, almost forgot.
I thought it was also important to mention the leveling system. It encourages the player to farm and level up fully knowing how they want to upgrade their characters. But it's on a more symbolic side that I feel like the leveling system has to be mentioned. Though the grid is linear, the fact that we get to kind of choose where to go gives a sense of freedom. It's less obvious in the beginning, but past a certain point, the characters can take different roads. This matches the game's message of choose your destiny and write your own story that Oren delivers before battling Yunalesca. The linear grid is a reference to the linear path the Spiran people all take, but that there's still a chance for change within the given pattern. The grid also emphasizes the uniqueness of each character. It also makes them crucial to the party. But this is something I'll dig further in the second or third. Just watch all of my analysis, and because I don't know anymore. The grid is also a reflection of each character's personality through combat. For example, it's clear that Waka has a great precision since he's a Blitzball player, but the most obvious connection between a character and their grid concerns Kimahri. At some point, Lulu mentions that the Ronso acquire techniques from the Fiends, and Kimahri is the only one that can choose different paths from the beginning and learn the same abilities as another character, which underlines his Ronso attributes. And that's all I had to say about the leveling system. The player doesn't just undergo the evolution of the characters, but has a sort of overview and control on where they're going. The fact that we get to choose how to upgrade the characters kind of breaks with the linear game, and it perfectly fits the general message of this game.
Now is the time to shape your stories. Your fate is in your hands!
I thought about a lot of things. Like where I was, what I got myself into.
Finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about in this part concerns the choice of having a clueless main character like Tidus. I don't get all the hate for Tidus, I really don't get it. The character is not rushed into the cliche cold-hearted numb-stoic hero that knows where he's going, and that makes Tidus relatable and relevant to the story in so many ways. Tidus is the exact thing to do in order to get the player to live an immersive experience. Having him be clueless was the best direction to take in order to avoid what Final Fantasy XIII and XV did. I'm referring to the fact that Lightning and Noctis perfectly know the world they live in, so there's no need for them to question anything about it, which leads to the development of a game that expects the player to pause the game and spend hours reading stuff in order to understand more. And it's so fun to read, right? Good for Lightning and Noctis that they know where they're going in their world, because I still have no clue.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
Maybe it's because my cerebral capacities are weaker than the rest of y'all, but I had no f***ing clue as what was going on in 15. In FF10 you get to play the game in order to discover the game, which is kind of great for today's standards. We see Spira through Tidus's eyes and learn with him. More than his personality, which I like a lot and which is complex and important to the story and which I will develop later, it's his voice acting that people complain about. I can't speak on that matter a lot because A, I was a kid back when I discovered the game, so I don't have the objectivity that's needed to criticize the voice acting, and B, as I mentioned it earlier, English is not my native language, so I believe it's hard for me to fully understand what a bad acting is in English, I guess. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, it's never bothered me. However, what I can talk about is how I perceive Tidus through his voice. The vision I have of him is one of a spoiled kid who is naive and whiny, and well, it's a 17-year-old celebrity put in a world he has no idea about, and it's told several times that he's a crybaby. He's also full of positivity, motivated, and cheerful. By the way, to make a connection to what I explained earlier with the sphere grid, cheer is the very first thing Tidus learns in the sphere grid. Tidus tries to hide his seriousness, which makes the moments he's serious solemn. He actually asks less questions than Solid Snake and tries his best not to get his personality crushed in this world where everybody follows teachings he's never heard of.
No. If I say what's our goal, you say victory!
He has to discover a whole new system and tries to adapt to it with the personality of a child. So here we are at the end of the first part of my analysis. You can join me on the next videos for my in-depth linear digging of the game, and for those of you who stayed through, a big thank you and a virtual hug. Don't hesitate to give me likes, as even though you can't see it, it took me a load of time to edit. Thank you and bye.